from Shankar Nethralaya, and I'm thankful for having all of you here. So the problem with me was I tried too much too fast. I joined my own independent practice, say in 2017, and this was right after my fellowship. Slides are not working.
Please help her with slides.
It is on slide mode.
Yeah, now it's working.
Okay, and also at the outset, I would like to thank everyone who's been associated with my journey, my teachers and my patients. It's been a very gratifying journey all throughout. Although I've made a lot of mistakes, but I'm grateful for all of them because I learned from them. So let me start by starting off with my first case. Now, what I did, I tried too much too fast in this case because I did my first trabeculectomy in independent practice, and that was on neovascular glaucoma. And we all know neovascular glaucoma is a high risk glaucoma, which anyway has a very high failure rate for doing trabeculectomies. So this was a patient who was pseudophakic, who had neovascular glaucoma following CRVO. His visual acuity was 1 by 60. His IOP on presentation was 35 millimeters of mercury. This was a complete secondary angle closure glaucoma with 360-degree synechiae. The patient was on whatever limited anti-glaucoma medications, steroids, and cycloplegics. This is how the patient's disc looked like. What I did on day one, started him on maximum medication, and of course supported by oral acetazolamide. On day 5, the patient's IOP came down to 15 millimeters of mercury, and within this time, 3 sittings of PRP was undertaken by the retina specialist. By day 9, we could see that there was regression of neovascularization of the iris. But however, 3 days later, after the Diamox washout, the IOP came back up to 39 millimeters of mercury. So on day 12, what I planned was trabeculectomy with Ologen implant, with the same sitting, also putting intravitreal anti-VEGF injection under mannitol cover with a local anesthesia. So this is a short video. So I want you to notice the video very carefully because we'll discuss about the mistakes I made over here. So these are mitomycin soaked sponges that I'm placing. I left it just for a minute and it was 0.2 mg per ml, and a triangular flap was fashioned. So in this case, I actually, frankly speaking, did a combination of mitomycin C with an Ologen implant, and also what deserves mention is this was my first Ologen implant also. So I'm entering the anterior chamber and then with the Kelly sponge making the sclerotomy. The PI was done. And I felt a well titrated apical suture was placed over there. There were no side sutures, and then this is a 6 mm diameter Ologen implant with a 2 mm height, which was placed right on top of the scleral flap, and the conjunctiva was covered. So the post-op course was something like this. On post-op day, the patient's IOP was 20 millimeters of mercury. It looked like a good localized bleb. AC was well formed. With massage, it was coming down to 80 millimeters of mercury. But suddenly, when I see the patient on post-op day 3, her pressures were 50 millimeters of mercury, which was not coming down with any sort of digital ocular massage. There was a diffuse shallow bleb, but what new I noticed was there was a dilated oval pupil over there. So we, of course, put the patient on mannitol. The IOP came down to 35. We again saw the patient, did a gonio for the patient. I could not visualize the peripheral iridotomy or iridectomy or the stoma. So then we put pilocarpine on the patient. Nothing really worked. We planned an iris repositioning for the patient because by day 4, the pressure was 40 millimeters of mercury. And so iris repositioning was done very simply. We went with a side port, injected a spatula, directed towards the stoma, and just swept it across. The IOP came down to 29 millimeters of mercury. This was the peaking iris. This is what happened after iris repositioning. The pupil was rounder. However, by day 9, again, the IOP was 49 millimeters of mercury. Of course, I did notice the vascularized bleb all throughout the course of the post-op follow-ups. So what I decided maybe the best thing to do would be a bleb needling with an apical suture removal at this point under topical anesthesia. Now, mind you, this was a blind procedure for me. I'm not showing you the video over here because there was an Ologen implant right in place, so I could not see my apical suture. Post-operatively, the IOP was 32 with massage came down to 26. The next day, because there was a vascularized bleb, the most logical thing to do was to put 5 FU injections, but then I went a little more aggressive and I also planned to do minimal bleb needling on the slit lamp at the same time that I was putting the 5 FU injection on the trabeculectomy site. So naturally it happened to be at the site of this bleb, and it was, I tried to be at least about 10 millimeters away from the sclerotomy, and I injected 5 FU. There was a small air bubble during the procedure that entered the anterior chamber. At that point, it sort of gave me a little satisfaction that there is some sign of filtration and it's not all that bad. So after 1 hour, the bleb increased in height and extent, and IOP came down to 8 millimeters of mercury. So does this mean that this case was solved? The very next day, although IOP was still was under control, it was 15 millimeters of mercury, but the patient presented with lower vision. There was mild corneal edema. There were DM folds in the patient's eye. ACU looked shallower than normal, although the CETLs was negative. There was no leak, nothing, and there was a dull retinal glow. So what most probably I was looking at was a 5-FU toxicity. So now there are multiple mistakes. The things that I learned from this were these. First mistake I made was that I planned trabeculectomy a little too fast. It was only within a gap of 3 days of the final sitting of PRP. Second mistake was I did a trabeculectomy with an Ologen implant in neovascular glaucoma. Third, that probably I combined trabeculectomy with intravitreal injections at the same sitting. Fourth, definitely I had a plugging of the iris, which is not excusable. Fifth was the 5-FU entering the anterior chamber. It shouldn't happen. And lastly, it made me think, was the choice of my procedure altogether wrong? So the first lesson is the timing of your panretinal photocoagulation and the surgical treatment of glaucoma has to have a gap. Ideally, 2 to 3 weeks you have to allow the NVI to regress and the inflammation to come down so that your surgical outcomes are better. And if there is in any way poor view that precludes adequate PRP, pars plana vitrectomy or lensectomy with endolaser or indirect PRP can be considered. But you have to ensure that the NVI is regressing, the eye is not a hot eye before you do trabeculectomy. Now, second bad choice was the use of Ologen in neovascular glaucoma. There are multiple problems I encountered with it. Now, in my experience, the Ologen implant goes and sits under the conjunctiva and Tenon's capsule. So this makes assessing the bleb morphology very difficult because you already have the implant sitting over there. So the bleb falsely looks elevated to you because of the implant itself. And consequently, it may take some experience to be able to accurately recognize whether the patient will benefit from further procedures such as release of sutures or needling, or is it just a false image. And second thing was the tamponade effect of the Ologen probably prevents free aqueous outflow, which is what we needed in this patient since we knew that this was a high-risk glaucoma and we needed good filtration to happen. There was no visualization of the apical suture, so even when I say that I did an apical suture removal, it's just in my thoughts. I'm not really sure whether the suture broke or not. The bleb needling became very difficult again because there was this implant in situ. When I went with my needle, I'm not sure if I went under the scleral flap and I could do the proper dissection or not. Then also, Ologen has been around, so there are contradictory views about some people like it, some people don't. So it probably does reduce subconjunctival scarring, but we're not really sure about the subscleral scarring because it's directly having a tamponade effect, and what it's enhancing is the apposition between the scleral flap and the scleral bed. And maybe more stronger antibiotics were required in this patient. So instead of doing an Ologen, I should have just gone in for the age-old method of using a 0.4 milligram mitomycin C for 3 minutes. Is my time up?
Okay.
Okay. So now what the literature teaches us is that there are very few studies on the use of Ologen in secondary angle closure glaucomas.
Saiba, you have to go
And-
fast.
Okay. Now, lesson number 3 again is the timing of intravitreal anti-VEGFs and the surgical procedure. So, the outcome of trabeculectomies is superior if previous anti-vitreal anti-VEGFs are given, which increases success rate from 62.6 to 95%. So, probably it was a bad idea combining the two. I should have, when the pressure was controlled after PRP, I should have still let the retinal surgeon do the anti-VEGF injection and then planned the trabeculectomy a few days later, because that itself would have reduced the inflammation, probably would have reduced the IOP a little further. Now, lesson number 4 was avoiding intraoperative complications. So, whenever you're closing up the case, make sure that you're looking at your peripheral iridectomy, which you've made. If you're not able to, it's not bad to even inject in some pilocarpine and constrict the pupil and see that your stoma is free and your iris is free from the wound. Lesson number 5 is be very cautious when you're injecting 5-FU in your patients, because ideally do it 180 degrees away, but then even if you want to be very aggressive, remain a little away from the bleb wall and not directly on the scleral flap, because although popular evidence says that there is no corneal endothelial toxicity or epithelial toxicity that, endothelial toxicity that 5-FU has had with being in the anterior chamber. However, lesser known facts are that there have been reports where people have found, where doctors have found that there was a loss in endothelial cell count. There were even snail track appearances in the cornea following the anterior chamber entry of 5-FU injections. So try and avoid this as much as possible. And also with the choice of procedure, I wouldn't be really sure, because both the surgical procedures have poor outcomes and there's no clear evidence with consistent basis for choosing between TRAB and GDD. So probably this wasn't so wrong. Now, my next case very quickly is, again, I attempted a retrabeculectomy in a patient with advanced glaucoma who had already had a previous cataract surgery with an IOP of 40 millimeters at the time of surgery. So this was a patient, he had had trabeculectomy in the past, followed by phacoemulsification. He was somewhere misdiagnosed for his allergies as conjunctivitis, and he was started on a combination of steroid antibiotic therapy. For 3 months, he was on those steroids, and of course, he became a steroid responder, and his pressure rose up to 40 millimeters of mercury. However, his IOP was 6/9. And these were severely depressed fields. The left eye, the right eye more than the left eye. He just had a tunnel vision. So what I did was, we planned a trabeculectomy with mitomycin under mannitol cover, because there was some area of mobile conjunctiva. On post-op 1 month, the bleb was fine. This was diffuse bleb. The IOP was fine. It was 16 millimeters of mercury. There was a well-formed anterior chamber. However, the visual acuity wouldn't improve beyond 6/24. So naturally, now the patient is going to come back and catch your neck if you drop your vision when you told them that there wouldn't be any effect in the vision. So I tried to investigate this patient on why the drop of vision happened. Over here, the cornea was clear, there was clear media, retina was normal, we did an OCT, that was normal, even the color vision was normal. The repeat visual fields were still pending, if you can think in the parallel direction of probably aggravation of glaucoma, but it's very rare in these just few days. So that made me wonder if wipeout is really real. So wipeout syndrome, for people who don't know, is an idiopathic, irreversible central loss of vision after glaucoma surgery with advanced disease. And it has a very low incidence, but the risk of not doing anything is 100% in these patients. So the mistake I made was I did not counsel the patient adequately. Like Dr. Nishant said, a lot of the times you don't tell our patients the 100% truth because we're scared that psychologically might develop that problem the next day. But then this is not always a good thing to do. So the lesson I learned over here was the importance of explaining to the patient the rarest of the complications. And a few management pearls in advanced glaucoma. I'm not going to get into the details for the lack of time. Now, a few intraoperative tips which might be helpful are: use antimetabolites, maintain the anterior chamber throughout the surgery, decompress the eye very slowly. Now, case number 3 This was a young female. She was 37 years old with unilateral recurrent anterior uveitis and secondary open angle glaucoma with an IOP of 16 millimeters of mercury. She was on on timolol 0.5%, and accidentally she was on regular follow-up on these medications, and accidentally she mentioned that she couldn't come on a certain follow-up day because she had an appointment with the gynecologist. So on probing, she confessed that she was pregnant, and she was already 3 months pregnant, and she concealed it because she was superstitious about letting it out. So the mistake I made over here is by not taking a proper history and not being aware of the fact that this was a childbearing age of the patient, and I should have asked this history before instituting any treatment. So always, always, always ask every woman of a childbearing age. In fact, these days, even maybe above 40, maybe less than 50 or above 50, I don't really know, but it's always better to ask them just to be sure before instituting any treatment. So what I did was, this patient had no risk factors, so I took her off the treatment, kept her on close follow-up, and the ignorance of this problem is huge. So there was a survey done in UK wherein 25% of the glaucoma specialists, they said that they've dealt with pregnant patients at some point in their life, but 1/3 out of these did not know how to manage them. So lessons I learned was, discuss pregnancy in advance, always ask for the history, then review the safety concerns of all the anti-glaucoma medications, reassess the treatment closer to delivery, again reassess at the time of lactation, avoid surgery as much as possible. So this is just a balance game that you have to play between the benefit to the mother, benefit to the newborn. I think I'll conclude.
Yeah,
Gone
I think
too
so.
much.
And since you don't
Thank
point out your wife's mistakes, there'll be no question.